And we're back in Inside the Ropes, and WrestleMania season is upon us, and we thought, why not go back in time and speak to one of the men who is one of the pioneers of the Attitude Era when it comes to WrestleMania. He is one of the original Ultimate Fighting champions, and one of the most intense individuals from the WWF back in the late 90s. It is the one and only, the world's most dangerous man, Ken Shamrock. Ken, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me.
And when you decided to make the jump to wrestling, because I mean the interesting thing is that you jumped from UFC to the sort of, you know, the Monday Night Wars, WCW against WWF. Was it always a case that you were going to go to the WWF, or was there interest from WCW? How did it all come about that you would end up going to the WWF?
Well, I think at the time that WCW had just basically got guys like Hunter Hearst. And I'm not sure of all the guys, but they Hulk Hogan, Nash, Hall, they grabbed a lot of their superstars, including Hunter Hearst Helmsley, who is now running the WWE, which is kind of it's interesting. But they all jumped ship and went back over to the WCW, and so they really didn't have, I don't think, the opportunity or even the thought of bringing somebody in like myself who had no really professional skills yet. And so Vince had the idea to change the direction of which way pro wrestling was going because he couldn't compete with superstar status. So he figured he needed to find a different direction to try and give him an edge to counteract the superstardom that they had just lost over to WCW. And so what he did was he brought me in because he had seen, which I think Vince has done this pretty much his whole life with creating storylines, was that he kind of listens to the ground outside of pro wrestling to see what people are watching, what people's interests are, whether it's political, whether it's in sports, and try and build stories and angles that would interest people because of what the society is going through. Just like when we have a war, Sergeant Slaughter. And, he was such a genius in that fact that he was able to listen to what people wanted. And at that time it was MMA. It was a big surge of people loving MMA and the style. And he went out and he actually sought to find something. And fortunately for me at that time, I right then became a free agent because I couldn't make the money I needed. Bob Meyer and myself had a talk. He let me go. And so I started on the market trying to find out where I could go, where I could continue to keep having fun, do what I love to do, or I'd have to quit. And fortunately for me, I was looking over in Japan. I looked at the WCW, and I looked into the WWF at the time. And Vince immediately jumped on me, immediately said, what is it that we got to do to try to make this work? And we sat down and we worked out something that we were all happy with. And immediately he started in, and then I saw his ideas of what he was doing, and I fit right into it. I said, man, this is right up my alley. I mean, I got to go into a situation where they're basically trying to turn wrestling into a part of the mixed martial arts world where, people have attitudes, they don't take crap from anybody, they go into the ring and they get their job done one way or the other. And I think, personally in my mind, I think that the match that he put together with Bret Hart and Stone Cold and me being the referee really set and changed the atmosphere of pro wrestling to what we see today.
The interesting thing as well is that you when you debuted for the WWF, you debuted on an episode of Raw from the Manhattan Center in New York, and that was I think it was the same night that ECW had invaded and stuff. What was that experience like? Because your first sort of night that you come in, you did the interview with, I think it was Todd Pettengill, and it was sort of like a rabid fan base. It was an interesting night to be there. What were your memories of that first night?
I was bright-eyed, it was such a big show. I've been in the UFC and I've fought in some big audiences in Japan and big productions and so when I went to the WWF at the time, and I watched the production and I watched the fans and I watched the stuff going on in the ring, it was such a big platform. And I remember myself thinking to myself, now this is big. I mean, this is probably bigger than what I've been used to. And so I really, at that moment, thought this might be something really fun for me. And I remember trying to understand it, and how it all worked, and trying to put all the pieces together so that I had the best chance to be able to perform and do the things I needed to do to be successful.
Absolutely. And we're in WrestleMania season now, and you were part of one of the biggest WrestleMania matches of all time with Bret Hart and Steve Austin, you as the referee. Was that Vince's idea to put you in there as the referee, and how did it all come about that they made the decision to put you in there as the referee? Because it seemed like such a great fit for you to be there, because these two guys who had this long rivalry that was very heated, and the only guy that could control them was Ken Shamrock.
Yeah, and I think Vince had this idea of changing the landscape of pro wrestling, because it had been going on for so long and it had done so well. And then the WCW came over and took a lot of their superstars, Hunter Hearst Helmsley went over there, Nash, Hall, Hogan. So they had some of their big faces go over there. And, so it hurts. Vince thought, just he needed something different. And the opportunity actually just sat right in his lap when it came to me being, wanting to go away from MMA because of the monies weren't there, and that the organization was struggling, and I could not support my family. So I had to make a move, and unfortunately for MMA, it's what had to be done. Fortunately for the world of wrestling and Vince McMahon, that I was a free agent, and that I had experience in pro wrestling, and that I wanted to take my talents into that world of wrestling. And for Vince, the mindset that he had, and the ingenuity and the brilliantness of putting something like that together at that time when things weren't that good for them, and his mind, the way it worked, that he'd been through this, several times before, he was able to always put something together to change things around. And then when he put me in that match with Bret Hart, Stone Cold, and it was an I Quit match, I thought it was brilliant, because that set the tone for what wrestling is today. Bret had an outstanding match with Stone Cold, and then me being the referee that set the tone for what those two were going to do in that match. It was literally, I was in there and I was watching things go on, and literally there was things in there that I was like, okay, these guys are really getting after each other, and that I had to really make sure that I was involved enough so that neither one of these guys took advantage of the other. And it was an outstanding match. The fans, went through the roof. And from that point on, wrestling is what it is today because of that match. The moves that you see now that have been done in wrestling, I did first. There's probably 20 of them holds that people are doing in wrestling now that I did first.
And shortly after WrestleMania, you would start wrestling on television. But when you came to the WWF, did you go to any sort of training facility and work with anyone? Was there anyone that you sort of credit with helping you at the beginning of your career there?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I went to Calgary for a while before I had my match with Vader. And Bret Hart and his family invited me in Calgary, and I stayed there for a while, and I worked on my matches, and Bret reminded me very clearly, and that I had taken the ring every time, is that you have to protect yourself, because some of these guys are going to try and hurt you, and you need to make sure that you have the skills enough to be able to protect yourself, and be able to counter and get back whatever you have to get back, like the old cliche is, if you got to be able to write a check and get a receipt. If someone's going to write a check, you have to give them a receipt. So I learned a lot going through that with Bret, and it really paid off in my match with Vader, because that was a very brutal match.
And when you had started out in the WWF, I was quite curious about how much creative input did you have with your character? Because obviously you'd come in from UFC, you were never going to be turned into like a sort of cheesy comedy character, because that wouldn't have been you. So did you have a lot of input in sort of how you wanted to come across when you were out in the ring?
Well, what Vince said to me was that he was going to bring me in, and that I neither would be a face or a heel, that I was going to be the world's most dangerous man, and I was going to be the guy from this MMA world, and that character is what I was going to carry over into pro wrestling. And so he allowed me to be me and be able to go into wrestling and do the things that I did, have the same attitude that I walked around with when I was training or fighting. And fortunately for me, and also for Vince and wrestling itself, that was a good era and a good time, because it went over big.
And also during that summer, you would have a match at the SummerSlam pay-per-view with Davey Boy Smith, the British Bulldog. And I just wondered what your memories are of working with him.
What a guy! I mean, just full of life, and strong. Just a strong guy. Very, very talented. And to be able to go on with a guy like that and have with the experience that he had was tremendous. And I remember that match. It was great, because there were so many things that he did that really kept me on my toes to try and keep up with him. And so when we finally finished that match, I was like really, really excited that I was able to get in a ring with such a guy and a legend of his status. It was one of my highlights.
And you would, shortly after Bret left the WWF, you would go on to main event the D-Generation X pay-per-view with Shawn Michaels. And what was that experience like for you? Because arguably to that point, that was your biggest match for the company. Main event in a pay-per-view against the WWF champion. Did you feel a lot of pressure going into that for being in that main event, or did you sort of thrive on being in that position?
Well, I think that's why I was able to, over my career, to be able to just kind of rise to the level. You talked about early on in my career where I was in Mooresville, North Carolina, where in two different organizations, they put the strap on me at such a young age. You talk about UFC, you talk about Pancrase. I was champion in both of those in a very short time. So when I went into pro wrestling and I had these opportunities, it was the same thing. Is that I rose to the challenge. I was excited. If you talk about a guy in basketball or football or baseball, the guys that when the game is on the line, they want the ball. Put it on me. I will get it done. Absolutely no hesitation. And there's a lot of guys who will always go, well, yeah, why don't you? It's okay, give it to him, even though they'll go, yeah, I can do it, but they won't fight for it. If somebody says, well, we're going to win this play, they won't. Well, no, give it to me. I promise I'll get it done. And that's who I am. That's who I was. Is that I was the guy that wanted the ball. And whether it was in fighting or whether it was in WWF or WWE, I wanted the ball. And so when they handed that off to me and they gave me an opportunity to jump in for that strap, I took the ball and I ran with it, the opportunity, and I always rose to the challenge. And that's kind of why I've always been able to reach that level. And so when I had that opportunity, it was the same thing. I rose to the occasion, and I was very excited about doing it.
And speaking of that, the next WrestleMania event was WrestleMania 14, which was arguably a turning point for the company, and you were involved in a high-profile match with The Rock for the Intercontinental Championship. And I remember watching it as a kid, and when you won the Intercontinental Championship, and then you famously put the ankle lock on and wouldn't let go, and they reversed the decision, and it was such a huge matchup as part of that show. What are your memories of getting to work with The Rock and being part of such a high-profile WrestleMania match as a wrestler?
Well, you look at highlights throughout your career when you have that opportunity just to have an opportunity to look back on your career a little bit. And, the achievements that you get to. When you're in the moment, you don't have an opportunity to stop and think about what your career has been about and the different parts of your lives that were important. Fortunately for me, I've had, a dozen of highlights that I can look back and say, wow, that was a changing moment for me. And I believe that match with The Rock and having that kind of high-profile match with a guy that was being groomed to take a shot at the world title in WWF. Actually, both of us, I thought we were. Both of us were being groomed for that, and I thought we were both on the rise, and that this program was going to last for 3, 4, 5 years, from the Intercontinental title all the way up to the heavyweight championship belt of the WWE. And I thought that this was the beginning of something great. And so when I had that match, and at the end of it, I felt like I had found a home. I felt like this is me. This is who I am now. And for the longest time I was playing me and continued to playing me. But then at that moment, I felt, and many times I felt that, but this was a particular moment where I felt like me, my character, and who I am can be here. I can live here.
And yeah, it was a great moment to watch. And later on that night, the WWF had brought in Mike Tyson to be a part of the main event with Steve Austin and Shawn Michaels. And Shawn Michaels wrestled through that horrendous back injury. What do you remember about that main event? Because a lot of people point to that as a turning point for the WWF with Austin, Tyson, and Michaels at WrestleMania.
Yeah, I thought that was an awesome thing. I know that they used me to challenge Mike Tyson. I thought that it was going to be the world's most dangerous man against the world's most dangerous boxer. And I don't know what happened. Maybe it was Mike Tyson that didn't want to get in a ring with me. So all those efforts that I did to get him into the World Wrestling Federation, calling him out, making statements to try and get him to come into the World Wrestling Federation. Once he got to the World Wrestling Federation, I was completely pushed aside. And Shawn Michaels and, of course, all the other people were involved, which I think it was a great move because working with me, Mike Tyson, myself, we would have been big, no question. But I think that having Stone Cold with that attitude, and Shawn Michaels with his attitude, and then Mike Tyson, I thought was a brilliant move.
And I guess the last WrestleMania event that you were a part of with the WWF during that run was WrestleMania 15. And it was a fatal 4-way match with you, the Road Dogg, Goldust, and Val Venus. How did you feel about that match, and do you have many fond memories of that particular WrestleMania?
Yeah, that was great. Each and every one was just another step for me. It seemed like every year my character got stronger and stronger. And so on that match, when we did that match, that was, to me, was I think another memory in which you saw wrestling and my character even go to another level, because that was so much going on. When you got a 4-way like that, being able to be not only just be in the match, but actually be able to carry the match with the rest of them, not having someone having to take your hand and lead you through it. I was able to be an instrumental part in that, able to not have someone carry my hand, but actually to be a strong character in that 4-way.
Yeah, and what did you that WrestleMania is an interesting WrestleMania because it was almost featured as an episode of Raw. There was a story throughout the night with Vince McMahon trying to find the referee for the main event, and it seems to stand alone from the different WrestleMania events in that it was more of a kind of story arc throughout the show. Did you think that was a good move for that time period?
At that time, I don't think there was anything that we could have done wrong. It just seemed like it was going so fast, and everything was coming together. There were so many talented people involved, from writing, choreographing, to talent in the ring, to talent in the office. It just seemed like everything was clicking. Even if that may not have been the best move at that time, it still didn't matter. It was, it was another tremendous show.
Hmm. And you, the month after WrestleMania, you got to work a match on pay-per-view with The Undertaker. And I just wondered, what was he like to work with, and what are your memories of The Undertaker?
Well, that was another one of those matches where I really thought that they put me in a situation where they were, and it was a big superstar where I was going to be an integral part of changing the Undertaker and who his character was going to be. And I remembered when we got together that, you know, my different submissions and things like that, that he was going to feel them. And that would turn him from being, you know, the Undertaker into being Mark, just a badass. And so, you know, that was a huge opportunity for me to be able to showcase that I have depth, that I can be handed something with another superstar, and that I could carry my weight. And so for me, that was one of those moments, I think, where they handed me the torch, even though the Undertaker still was the guy, but they allowed me to be able to take my character, do what I needed to do to help turn him to another character.
And then in 1999, you would have a kind of short run with Chris Jericho, and then we wouldn't see you again on WWF television. I think there was rumors that you had an injury at one point, but what led to you leaving the WWF after that point?
Well, it was me. It had nothing to do with the WWE or it was a choice that I made. I just at the time I felt myself going in the wrong direction, and there was opportunities for me to go back into MMA. Things were picking up a little bit, and I felt like I had run my course with the WWF, and that maybe it was time for me to seek out other avenues, which, you know, again, like I said, I see guys doing this all the time. I've even seen guys change to WCW and then come back into the WWF and run it. So there's a lot of things that I saw going on, and so I felt like this decision that if it didn't, you know, maybe I should take a break, refresh myself, go have some fun in MMA again, and then maybe later on come back into pro wrestling. And I really didn't think that would be an issue for me to do that, because obviously I know the history of a lot of these guys who have been there and come back, and even through, you know, bad situations, and they come back and they do well. So I thought those options would be available for me, and up to this point they have not been, and I'm a little bit confused of why not. I don't think I pissed anybody off or made any enemies other than, you know, disagreements or you know, personal issues of my own. I don't think there was anything that I did to hurt anybody, like I've seen some other guys do who have been accepted back in a very high position, and you know, and I don't know. I'm lost at why I haven't had an opportunity, because I definitely put out my interests to viewers. I really don't have a contact number anymore. I did reach out to Shane McMahon years ago, and he said that time from what he had understood was that they were doing fine. At this point, there was no interest, and you know, I had no problem. And then, you know, a few years later, starting with about 2.5 years later, I put out some more feelers, and then this is just hearsay, that I don't know if it's true or not. But from what I was told, that Hunter Hearst Helmsley had said that they were doing fine without me, and I thought to myself, it's not about doing fine. I mean, you guys, obviously, I'm just another person, and it doesn't have no effect of whether or not you're there or not there. But an opportunity for me to come back and, you know, get another shot. I thought I had earned that by coming in a 2.5 time period with really not an option to really develop my character in a short period of time, and captured a lot of different titles. And And I figured, well, now I've got a little more experience coming back in, and I could develop a little bit more into my character. I've got a little bit more experience, and then I could make the character even more dangerous. And I thought, what a great opportunity. And then all of a sudden, it's like it's not available.